Power is one of the most misunderstood forces in human history. Most people believe that powerful individuals disappear because someone stronger defeats them. They imagine dramatic betrayals, public scandals, or sudden revolutions, but reality is rarely that simple. The downfall of the powerful almost always begins long before anyone notices. It starts in silence, hidden behind applause, success, and admiration. While the world sees confidence, the foundations are already cracking beneath their feet. Power does not create enemies overnight. It attracts them quietly, patiently, and often invisibly. The moment a person begins to rise above the crowd, they unknowingly enter a different psychological world. Success changes how others perceive them. Admiration is often mixed with jealousy, respect with resentment, and loyalty with hidden ambition. Most powerful people believe their greatest dangers come from obvious rivals who openly challenge them. In reality, the most dangerous opponents are usually those who remain silent, smile in public, and wait for the right opportunity. This is why many powerful figures are shocked when they suddenly fall. They never saw the true threat because it never announced itself. Robert Greene often emphasizes that human nature is driven less by logic than by emotion. People compare themselves constantly. When someone gains influence, wealth, or authority, they unintentionally become a mirror that reflects the insecurities of others. Even close allies can begin to feel overshadowed. They may continue offering support while privately hoping for the leader's decline. This hidden resentment accumulates over months or even years, creating invisible enemies who patiently collect information, build alliances, and prepare for moments of weakness. The greatest mistake powerful individuals make is believing that visible praise represents genuine loyalty. Crowds applaud success because they are attracted to strength, but applause is temporary. The same people who celebrate a leader's victories can quickly distance themselves when circumstances change. Human beings naturally move toward security, and when power begins to weaken, many followers quietly search for a new center of influence. What once appeared to be an unbreakable network of supporters can dissolve with surprising speed. Invisible enemies rarely attack directly. Instead, they spread doubt, encourage division, and exploit small mistakes until they become major crises. A careless statement, a moment of arrogance, or one poor decision becomes the spark they have been waiting for. Because they have remained unnoticed, their actions seem to come from nowhere. The powerful individual believes the collapse is sudden, while in truth, it has been developing beneath the surface for years. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Leaders become so focused on external victories that they neglect the emotional landscape around them. They fail to notice growing envy among colleagues, frustration among followers, or ambition within trusted circles. Confidence slowly turns into complacency, and vigilance disappears. Once awareness fades, hidden opponents gain the advantage because they understand the leader better than the leader understands them. The wisest individuals never assume they are universally admired. They understand that influence naturally attracts both admiration and silent resistance. Instead of becoming intoxicated by praise, they remain observant, humble, and attentive to subtle changes in people's behavior. They recognize that true security comes not from eliminating every enemy, but from never forgetting that invisible opposition always exists wherever significant power is found. The greatest threat to powerful people is rarely an external rival. It is the gradual transformation that power creates within their own mind. Success has a subtle way of convincing people that every decision they make is correct. After enough victories, they begin to mistake experience for infallibility. This is the psychological trap that Robert Greene repeatedly warns against. Confidence is necessary to achieve greatness, but when confidence grows unchecked, it evolves into overconfidence. At that point, judgment becomes distorted, caution disappears, and the very qualities that created success begin to destroy it. Overconfidence develops slowly because success provides constant reinforcement. Every achievement strengthens the belief that one's instincts are superior to everyone else's. Advisors who once challenged decisions become hesitant to speak honestly. Friends become careful with their words. Employees learn that agreement is rewarded while criticism carries consequences. As a result, the powerful person begins living inside an echo chamber where every opinion confirms what they already believe. They mistake silence for agreement and obedience for respect. This illusion is dangerous because reality never stops changing. Markets shift, alliances evolve, public opinion transforms, and competitors adapt. The overconfident individual, however, believes yesterday's strategies will continue producing tomorrow's victories. Instead of questioning assumptions, they defend them. Instead of studying new threats, they dismiss them. Every warning is interpreted as negativity rather than valuable information. Their greatest weakness becomes their inability to imagine failure. Human psychology makes this pattern almost inevitable. The more authority someone possesses, the harder it becomes for others to contradict them. Even intelligent leaders gradually receive less honest feedback because people fear damaging the relationship or losing opportunities. Without realizing it, they become isolated from reality while remaining surrounded by people. Their decisions are no longer tested by disagreement, but protected by flattery. History is filled with leaders who expanded too quickly, trusted their instincts too completely, or underestimated seemingly weaker opponents. They believed their previous victories guaranteed future success. Yet every defeat began with a single assumption that turned out to be wrong. Overconfidence blinded them to risks that would have been obvious had they remained humble enough to question themselves. The truly powerful never allow success to convince them that they have mastered every situation. They deliberately seek uncomfortable opinions because they understand that criticism is often more valuable than praise. They remain students even after becoming masters. They examine their own motives, question their assumptions, and recognize that every victory contains the seed of future failure if it encourages complacency. Power is sustained not by believing you cannot lose, but by acting as though every new challenge requires fresh discipline. Those who remain alert continue evolving, while those who believe they have already reached the summit stop climbing. The moment growth ends, decline quietly begins, and by the time the consequences become visible, the opportunity to correct them has often already passed. Power often appears to place a person at the center of the world, surrounded by advisors, supporters, admirers, and endless activity. Yet one of the greatest paradoxes of influence is that the higher someone rises, the more isolated they often become. Robert Greene has frequently explored this psychological reality. Authority does not simply change how others treat you, it changes the quality of the information you receive. The people around a powerful individual gradually stop revealing uncomfortable truths. They become careful, diplomatic, and strategic with every word. In doing so, they unintentionally trap the leader inside a carefully constructed version of reality, one that feels safe but grows increasingly disconnected from the truth. Isolation rarely begins with physical distance, it begins with emotional distance. A leader who once welcomed disagreement starts interpreting criticism as disloyalty. Meetings become less about discussion and more about approval. Honest advisors are replaced by agreeable personalities who reinforce existing beliefs rather than challenge them. At first, this feels efficient because decisions are made quickly and conflicts seem to disappear, but beneath that surface lies a dangerous weakness. Without opposition, judgment loses its sharpness. Every decision becomes less tested, less refined, and more vulnerable to error. Human beings naturally seek acceptance and security. When someone's career or future depends on staying close to a powerful figure, many choose silence instead of honesty. They notice mistakes but keep them to themselves. They recognize flaws in a strategy yet hesitate to speak. Over time, The leader mistakes this silence for confidence in their abilities, never realizing it is often driven by fear rather than respect. The result is an environment where truth becomes increasingly rare. Psychologically, isolation also changes the way a powerful person thinks. Without regular exposure to opposing viewpoints, they begin trusting their instincts above all else. They stop questioning assumptions because no one around them forces them to do so. This creates intellectual stagnation. The mind becomes rigid, convinced that past success guarantees future wisdom, yet the world never remains still. Circumstances evolve, competitors adapt, and people change. A leader trapped in isolation fails to recognize these shifts until the consequences become impossible to ignore. History repeatedly reveals that many great rulers, executives, and influential figures did not collapse because they lacked intelligence. They collapsed because they became disconnected from reality. They no longer understood how ordinary people felt, how trusted allies were thinking, or how hidden frustrations had been growing beneath the surface. Their isolation prevented them from seeing problems while those problems were still manageable. The strongest leaders deliberately fight against this tendency. They encourage disagreement instead of punishing it. They surround themselves with people confident enough to challenge their decisions. They ask difficult questions even when the answers threaten their ego. They understand that wisdom does not come from always being right, but from remaining open to correction. By protecting honest dialogue and resisting the comfort of constant agreement, they preserve their ability to see reality clearly. In the end, judgment is not destroyed by a lack of intelligence, but by the quiet isolation that convinces powerful people they no longer need to listen. Every empire, whether built by a king, a business leader, a military commander, or a cultural icon, begins with one essential quality: adaptation. The rise to power is never accidental. It is earned by recognizing opportunities others overlook, responding to changing conditions, and adjusting strategies faster than competitors. Robert Greene consistently emphasizes that power belongs not to the strongest or the smartest, but to those who understand the constant movement of human nature. Yet the irony is that once people achieve great success, they often abandon the very habit that brought them there. They become attached to routines, convinced that what worked yesterday will continue working tomorrow. This attachment marks the beginning of decline. Success creates comfort, and comfort creates resistance to change. A powerful individual starts believing they have discovered a permanent formula for victory. Instead of questioning their methods, they defend them. Instead of experimenting, they repeat familiar patterns. This mindset slowly turns strength into weakness because the world never stops evolving. Markets transform, technology advances, cultures shift, and people's expectations change. Those who refuse to adapt eventually find themselves solving today's problems with yesterday's solutions. The danger is rarely visible at first. A leader may continue winning for years despite becoming less flexible. Early successes create the illusion that nothing needs to change. Followers continue offering praise, reinforcing the belief that the current path is correct. Meanwhile, competitors observe quietly. They study weaknesses, embrace innovation, and prepare for a future that the dominant figure refuses to acknowledge. By the time the powerful person notices the shift, the balance has already changed. Human psychology naturally resists adaptation because change threatens identity. A successful person often associates their methods with their self-worth. To admit that a strategy no longer works feels like admitting personal failure. As a result, they cling to outdated beliefs long after evidence suggests otherwise. Pride becomes stronger than curiosity. Ego becomes stronger than learning. This psychological attachment prevents growth and blinds them to new realities unfolding around them. History offers countless examples of rulers who underestimated changing political landscapes. companies that dismissed emerging technologies, and influential figures who ignored cultural transformations. None of them disappeared because they lacked intelligence. They disappeared because they believed their previous achievements exempted them from continuous evolution. Their greatest victories became the prison that limited their future possibilities. The truly enduring individuals understand that power is never a destination but a process. Every achievement is treated as temporary. Every success is something that must be earned again. They constantly observe changing circumstances, question established habits, and remain willing to abandon old methods when better ones emerge. They recognize that flexibility is not a sign of weakness but a demonstration of confidence. Only those secure in their abilities can afford to change course without feeling threatened. Adaptation also requires humility. It demands the courage to admit mistakes before they become disasters and the wisdom to learn from people regardless of their status. A leader who continues asking questions remains mentally alive. One who believes they already possess every answer begins drifting away from reality. In the end, empires rarely collapse in a single dramatic moment. They erode through countless small refusals to adapt until the world has moved forward while their thinking remains trapped in the past. Fear can produce obedience, but it can never produce lasting loyalty. This is one of the oldest and most overlooked truths about power. Throughout history, rulers, executives, military leaders, and influential figures have believed that if people feared the consequences of disobedience, their position would remain secure. For a time, this strategy often appears successful. Orders are followed, criticism disappears, and discipline seems absolute. Yet beneath this appearance of stability lies a dangerous illusion. Fear controls behavior only while the source of fear remains overwhelming. The moment that power weakens, suppressed emotions quickly rise to the surface. Those who once appeared loyal often become the first to abandon or even oppose the person they once obeyed. Robert Greene frequently points out that human beings are driven by self-interest before sentiment. A person who remains close to a powerful leader out of fear is not emotionally committed to that leader. They are committed to protecting themselves. This distinction becomes crucial during moments of uncertainty. When circumstances change and the leader loses influence, fearful followers immediately begin calculating where their future security lies. Since their relationship was never built on trust or genuine respect, they feel little hesitation in changing sides. Their loyalty disappears because it was never loyalty in the first place. Fear also creates silence, and silence is one of the greatest threats to anyone in power. People stop sharing honest opinions because they worry about punishment. They hide problems instead of reporting them. They agree with flawed decisions rather than risk disagreement. At first, this appears beneficial because conflict is reduced. Meetings become smoother, instructions are carried out without debate, and the leader feels increasingly confident. In reality, vital information is being buried. Mistakes multiply unnoticed because everyone is focused on avoiding blame instead of solving problems. Another consequence of fear-based leadership is hidden resentment. People may smile, obey, and speak respectfully in public while privately wishing for change. Every humiliation, every unfair punishment, and every display of arrogance leaves a psychological mark. Those memories accumulate over time. Individuals who cannot openly resist often wait patiently, believing that an opportunity for revenge or escape will eventually arrive. When that opportunity comes, years of suppressed frustration can be released all at once, making the collapse appear sudden, even though its emotional foundation was built over a long period. True influence depends on something much stronger than intimidation. It depends on credibility, fairness, and consistent behavior. When people believe a leader values competence, listens carefully, and treats others with respect, they develop a deeper connection that survives temporary setbacks. They remain supportive, not because they are forced to stay, but because they choose to. This voluntary loyalty becomes one of the strongest forms of power because it cannot easily be bought or threatened away. The wisest leaders understand that authority should inspire confidence rather than constant fear. They establish clear boundaries and enforce standards, but they avoid humiliating people simply to display dominance. They recognize that respect grows when strength is combined with restraint. A person who relies exclusively on fear becomes trapped, constantly needing to demonstrate greater force to maintain control. Eventually, that cycle becomes impossible to sustain. When people respect a leader's character as much as their authority, loyalty becomes resilient. It withstands difficult decisions, temporary failures, and external pressure because it is rooted in trust instead of intimidation. Those who confuse fear with devotion may appear powerful for a season, but when circumstances shift, they often discover that the crowd surrounding them was never truly standing beside them at all. The final lesson that separates those who maintain influence from those who suddenly disappear is the ability to recognize when it is time to step back before circumstances force them to do so. Most people assume that power is measured by how long someone can hold on to a position, but Robert Greene's perspective suggests something much deeper. True power lies in understanding timing. Every position of influence has a natural rhythm. There is a moment to rise, a moment to dominate, a moment to consolidate, and eventually a moment to withdraw with dignity. Those who ignore this rhythm often mistake persistence for strength, when in reality it becomes the very cause of their downfall. One of the greatest temptations that accompanies success is the desire to prove that it can last forever. A powerful individual begins identifying completely with their title, reputation, or authority. Their position no longer feels like something they possess, it becomes who they are. This psychological attachment makes the idea of stepping back almost unbearable. They fear that without power, they will lose significance, admiration, or identity. As a result, they remain in control long after their effectiveness has begun to decline. History repeatedly demonstrates that many respected leaders damaged their own legacy by refusing to leave at the right moment. They ignored changing public opinion, dismissed younger perspectives, and continued making decisions with outdated assumptions. Instead of being remembered for years of achievement, they became associated with the failures that marked their final chapter. Their inability to let go overshadowed everything they had previously accomplished. Human nature makes this especially difficult because success creates addiction. Every victory releases a sense of satisfaction that encourages people to seek even greater recognition. The applause of supporters, the respect of peers, and the influence over important decisions become emotionally rewarding. Over time, these rewards create dependence. The powerful person starts believing that life without authority would be empty, so they resist every sign that suggests transition is necessary. This resistance clouds judgment and encourages increasingly risky decisions aimed at preserving a fading position. The truly strategic individual understands that influence is often strongest when exercised with restraint. Walking away at the right moment can preserve mystery, protect reputation, and create opportunities for future return. A leader who chooses the timing of their departure maintains control over the narrative surrounding their legacy. They are remembered for their wisdom rather than their stubbornness. By contrast, those who cling desperately to power allow events and opponents to dictate the terms of their exit. Stepping back should never be confused with surrender. It is often a calculated move that demonstrates confidence rather than weakness. A person secure in their abilities understands that value does not disappear simply because a title changes. They invest in mentoring others, building lasting systems, and creating influence that survives beyond their direct involvement. Their legacy becomes larger than their personal presence because they prepared others to continue what they began. Perhaps the greatest illusion of power is believing that remaining visible is always necessary. In reality, Some of the most influential people understand the importance of strategic absence. They withdraw to observe, reflect, and adapt while others exhaust themselves competing for attention. Their silence becomes more powerful than constant visibility because it creates anticipation instead of fatigue. They understand that presence gains value when it is not constant. Those who disappear by choice often retain respect because they leave before desperation becomes visible. They recognize subtle signs of change, accept that every era eventually ends, and prepare for the future instead of fighting against it. In doing so, they transform what could have been a humiliating fall into a deliberate transition, proving that the highest form of power is not refusing to let go, but knowing exactly when letting go allows your influence to endure long after your position has passed to someone else.